I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd destroy a man's entire life over a single text message. But then again, I never thought I'd be the kind of woman whose husband would make me into exactly that kind of woman either. My name is Patricia, Patty to the people who knew me before everything changed, and I'm 63 years old. For 41 of those years, I was married to a man named Robert Henley. Bob. That's what everyone called him. Good old Bob. Dependable Bob. Bob who coached Little League and never missed a mortgage payment and kissed me goodbye every single morning for 4 decades. The morning it all started, I was standing in our kitchen in Ridgewood, a quiet suburb just outside of Portland, Oregon. The kind of place where people still wave to their neighbors and complain about property taxes at HOA meetings. I was making chamomile tea. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, arthritis creeping into my knuckles like unwelcome houseguests, when my phone buzzed on the granite countertop. It was from Sarah, my eldest daughter. 38 years old, sharp as a tack, general manager of a boutique hotel downtown called the Clearwater. She'd worked her way up from front desk to management, and I'd never been more proud of anyone in my entire life. The message was simple: "Mom, is Dad home?" I glanced toward the hallway. Bob had been in bed since yesterday afternoon, claiming he'd come down with something. A stomach bug, he said. Needed to rest. I'd brought him soup twice, checked his forehead for fever, even offered to call Dr. Morrison. He'd waved me off both times, said he just needed sleep. I typed back, "Yes, honey. He's been in bed all day. Still not feeling well. Why?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. And then my entire world tilted sideways. "That's strange," Sarah wrote. "He just checked into my hotel with someone." I read it 3 times. 4. The words didn't change. My brain tried to make them make sense. Maybe she'd made a mistake, maybe it was someone who looked like Bob, maybe the system glitched, but my hands were already shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I was about to type back when I heard it. The soft creak of our bedroom door opening behind me. If you've ever had that moment where your entire body goes cold and hot at the same time, where every sound becomes impossibly loud and your heart tries to climb out through your throat, then you know exactly how I felt. I stood frozen, my back to the hallway, staring at Sarah's message on my phone screen while footsteps, Bob's footsteps, padded softly across the hardwood floor behind me. "Patty." His voice was hoarse. Perfectly hoarse. Oscar-worthy hoarse. "Could you bring me some water?" I turned slowly, phone clutched in my hand. He was standing there in his pajamas, the blue plaid ones I'd bought him last Christmas, his hair messy, eyes squinting against the kitchen light. He looked sick. He looked like a man who'd been in bed all day fighting off a stomach bug. He looked like a goddamn liar. "Sure," I heard myself say. My voice sounded normal. Steady. Strange what shock does to you, how it can make you perform normalcy even when your insides are screaming. "Be right there." He shuffled back toward the bedroom, and I stood there, a 63-year-old woman who'd spent 41 years building a life with a man who was apparently, right at this very moment, checked into a hotel with someone else while his body double played sick in our bed. I want you to understand something. When you reach my age, when you've spent more than half your life with someone, betrayal doesn't hit you like a slap. It hits you like a building collapse. Like every foundation you built your life on just turned out to be cardboard and lies. My hands were still shaking as I filled a glass with water. I could hear Bob settling back into bed, the rustle of sheets, the small groan he made performed, for my benefit. And standing there in my kitchen, with my daughter's text burning into my retina and my husband's lies coating every surface like poison, something inside me that had been soft and trusting for 6 decades began to calcify into something else entirely. Something harder. Something meaner. Something that wanted revenge. I brought Bob his water. Watched him drink it with his perfectly practiced sick person trembling hands. Told him to rest. Closed the door gently behind me. Then I went back to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and typed to Sarah, "Are you absolutely certain?" Her response came in seconds. "Mom, I saw him myself. I was covering the front desk. He checked in 20 minutes ago. Room 412. He's with a woman. Blonde, maybe 40. They were close." I had to sit down. My legs just gave out, and I found myself in one of our kitchen chairs, the ones Bob and I had picked out together at that furniture store in Beaverton, the ones we'd argued about because he wanted leather and I wanted fabric, and we'd compromised on these, staring at nothing. If you're watching this and you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to tell you, what I did next, it's going to sound crazy. It's going to sound like the actions of a woman who'd lost her mind. But here's the thing, I hadn't lost my mind at all. I'd finally, after 63 years of being nice and accommodating and understanding, found it. And let me tell you, check the description below for more stories like this, because what happened next, what I uncovered, what I did, it's the kind of story that makes you realize the people you think you know best are often the people you don't know at all. I sat in that kitchen for 20 minutes, just breathing, just thinking. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, another thing Bob and I had bought together, at an estate sale in Eugene 15 years ago. Every object in this house was a memory. Every corner held some piece of our shared history. And he was at a hotel. Right now. With someone else. The practical part of my brain, the part that had raised 3 children and managed a household and stayed calm during emergencies, began to click into gear. I needed proof. Sarah's word would be enough for me, but if this was going to get ugly, and oh, it was going to get ugly, I needed evidence. I texted Sarah back, "Don't let on that you know who he is. Act professional. I need you to do something for me. Anything, Mom. I need copies of the hotel security footage. Parking lot, lobby, elevator. And I need to know how long he booked the room for." There was a pause. Then, "Mom, are you okay?" I almost laughed. Was I okay? I was the furthest thing from okay. But I was also, for the first time in my entire marriage, clear-headed about who my husband really was. "I will be," I typed back. "How long for the room?" 3 nights. 3 nights. 3 nights. He'd told me he was sick. He'd let me fuss over him, bring him soup, worry about him. And he'd planned a 3-night affair at my daughter's hotel. The arrogance of it. The stupidity of it. Or maybe he just didn't think I was smart enough to figure it out. Maybe after 41 years of me being faithful, devoted Patty, he'd assumed I was too dumb or too broken down or too dependent to ever question him. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Bob was snoring softly in our bed, the one we'd shared for 41 years, where we'd conceived our children, where we'd held each other through his father's death and my mother's cancer and every small sadness in between, while his real body was 3 miles away tangled up with someone else. Except, wait. My brain caught on that thought like a splinter. I crept down the hallway at 2 a.m, pushed open the bedroom door as quietly as I could, and stared at the shape under our covers. Bob's shape. Bob's breathing. Bob's body. The moonlight coming through our window cast everything in silver and shadow, and for one horrible, disorienting moment, I thought I'd lost my mind. That maybe I'd imagined Sarah's text. That maybe this was early-onset dementia, or a psychotic break, or a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But then my phone buzzed in my bathrobe pocket, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Sarah's text, "Mom, footage is ready. Can you come to the hotel tomorrow? I don't want to send this electronically." I backed out of the bedroom, closed the door, and stood in the dark hallway trying to make my racing heart slow down. Bob was in our bed. Bob was at the hotel. Both things were somehow true, and my brain couldn't reconcile them. Unless, oh God, unless it wasn't a woman he'd checked in with. The realization hit me like ice water. What if he'd checked in with his brother? His identical twin brother, David, who lived in Seattle and who I hadn't seen in almost 2 years because of some fight they'd had about their mother's estate. Bob and David Henley. Born 3 minutes apart. Impossible to tell apart unless you knew them well. And even then, in the right light, wearing the same clothes. My mind was racing now, trying to piece together a scenario that made sense. Maybe David had come to town. Maybe he was having an affair, and Bob was covering for him somehow. Maybe. But no. That didn't explain why Bob had been pretending to be sick. Why he'd been in bed all day when Sarah said he'd checked into the hotel. Unless David was the one in our bed, pretending to be Bob, while Bob was at the hotel pretending to be. I had to sit down again. Right there in the hallway, I just sank to the floor, my back against the wall, my 63-year-old body folding down like a discarded puppet. If you've ever had one of those moments where reality stops making sense, where everything you thought was solid turns out to be smoke, drop a comment and tell me what you did. Because I'm sitting here telling you this story, and even now, years later, I still can't quite believe what I discovered. The next morning Bob, or whoever was in my bed, shuffled out to the kitchen looking appropriately miserable. I made him toast, poured him orange juice, played the part of concerned wife while my insides churned with suspicion and rage and a growing horror that I couldn't quite name yet. "How are you feeling?" I asked, watching his face carefully. "A little better," he said. His voice still had that raspy quality. "Still pretty weak though. Might need another day in bed." "Of course," I said. "Whatever you need." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt? Fear? Or just the calculation of a man wondering if his wife was stupid enough to keep buying his bullshit? "You're good to me, Patty," he said softly. "I don't deserve you." That last part, at least, was true. I waited until he'd gone back to bed before I grabbed my purse and car keys. Told whoever was in my bed, that I was going to the grocery store. He just waved weakly and burrowed back under the covers. The drive to the Clearwater took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. 12 minutes of my mind spinning through every possible explanation, each one more horrible than the last. Sarah was waiting for me in her office, her face drawn and worried. My youngest daughter had inherited my auburn hair and Bob's height, and seeing her standing there, so concerned, so adult, made me want to cry. When had my babies grown up? When had I gotten old enough that my children were the ones taking care of me? "Mom," she said, coming around her desk to hug me. "I'm so sorry." "Show me," I said. "Whatever you have, I need to see it." She pulled up the security footage on her computer. The timestamp said yesterday, 2:47 p.m. The parking lot camera showed a car I recognized immediately. Bob's silver Honda Accord, the one with the small dent in the rear bumper from when he'd backed into a mailbox 2 years ago. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Bob, my husband of 41 years, got out of the driver's side. He was wearing jeans and his green windbreaker, looking perfectly healthy. No sign of illness at all. And from the passenger side emerged. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart hammering. It was a woman. Blonde, like Sarah had said. But that wasn't what made me gasp. What made me gasp was that she wasn't 40. She wasn't some young thing he'd picked up at a bar or met at work. She was my age. Maybe older. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone with arthritis or bad knees. She looked like me. Not identical. But similar enough. Similar height, similar build, similar age. She even had her hair cut in a short bob like mine had been for the last decade. "Keep watching," Sarah said quietly. The lobby footage showed them checking in. Bob's body language was relaxed, familiar. He touched the woman's lower back as they walked to the elevator. She leaned into him. They looked like a couple who'd been together for years. Comfortable. Intimate. The timestamp on their room entry was 2:56 p.m. At exactly 2:56 p.m. yesterday, I had been at home, bringing soup to the man in my bed who was pretending to be sick. "There's more," Sarah said. She looked like she might be sick herself. "Mom, I need you to prepare yourself." She pulled up another file. More footage. But this was from 2 months ago. Then 6 months ago. Then a year ago. Different dates. Same pattern. Bob checking in with the same woman. Sometimes for one night. Sometimes for a weekend. Always when he told me he was somewhere else. A fishing trip with his buddies, a conference for work, visiting his brother in Seattle. How far back does this go? My voice sounded hollow, distant, like it was coming from underwater. "I only have access to 18 months of archived footage," Sarah said. "But Mom." Every time he checked in, he paid cash. And he always used a different name. I only caught it this time because I was covering the front desk and saw him with my own eyes. A different name. Cash. A woman who looked like a version of me. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't some midlife crisis or a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a double life. And suddenly, with horrible clarity, I understood. The man in my bed wasn't Bob. It was David. Bob's twin brother. They'd been swapping places. Bob would tell me he had to travel for work or take a trip or needed a guy's weekend, and David would show up at our house to pretend to be Bob. To maintain the illusion of normalcy, while Bob lived his other life 3 miles away at my daughter's hotel. For how long? How many years had they been doing this? How many times had I kissed David thinking he was Bob? How many conversations had I had with the wrong brother? How many nights had I slept next to a man who wasn't my husband? The room started to spin, and I had to grab the edge of Sarah's desk to keep from falling. Mom? Mom, breathe. Just breathe. But I couldn't breathe. Because I just realized something else. Something that made everything so much worse. David's wife, Linda, had died 4 years ago. Lung cancer. I'd gone to the funeral. Bob had been devastated for his brother, had traveled to Seattle multiple times to help David through his grief. Or had he? Sarah, I said, my voice shaking. I need you to check something for me. In your records. I need to know if he's been checking in here for the last 4 years. She typed, clicked, her face growing paler with each passing second. Mom, she whispered. The earliest record I can find. It's from 4 years and 3 months ago. Right after Aunt Linda died. David hadn't been grieving in Seattle. He'd been here. In Ridgewood. Living in my house as Bob while Bob lived in that hotel room with a woman who looked like me but wasn't me. They'd traded their entire lives. And I'd been too stupid, too trusting, too old and comfortable to notice. I drove home in a daze. My hands worked the steering wheel, my feet operated the pedals, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere dark and calculating and absolutely ruthless. For 41 years, I'd been a good wife. A good mother. A good woman. I'd swallowed my own dreams to support Bob's career. I'd moved 3 times for his promotions. I'd raised our children largely alone while he worked late and traveled for business. I'd been understanding about missed anniversaries and forgotten birthdays. I'd grown old gracefully and quietly, never complaining about my fading looks or my aching joints or the way society made women my age invisible. And this was what I got in return. A decades-long deception. A twin brother sleeping in my bed. A husband living 3 miles away with a replacement wife. The rage that welled up in me wasn't hot. It was cold. Ice cold. The kind of cold that doesn't explode but instead calcifies into something harder than diamond. I pulled into our driveway, mine and Bob's, except it wasn't really Bob's anymore, was it? It was mine and David's apparently, and sat there for 5 full minutes, engine off, hands still gripping the wheel. Then I went inside with a smile on my face. Honey. I called out, my voice sugary sweet. I'm home. David, because that's who it was, that's who it had been for God knows how long, emerged from the bedroom looking rumpled and weak. How are you feeling? I asked, touching his forehead with my hand. He felt warm. Had he been faking a fever too? Do you need anything? Just rest, he said, and his voice was so much like Bob's that if I hadn't known, I'd never have guessed. Thanks for taking care of me, Patty. You're the best. I made him lunch. Soup and crackers, just like he liked. Or just like Bob liked. Did David like the same things? Had they coordinated their preferences, or was being identical twin brothers enough that they naturally had the same tastes? While he ate, I texted Sarah from the bathroom, don't tell anyone what we discovered. Not your sisters, not anyone. I need time to think. Her response was immediate. Mom, are you safe? Should I call the police? Safe. Was I safe? I was living with an imposter, but he was an imposter who thought I didn't know. Who thought his brother had successfully fooled me for years. In a strange way, that made me safer than I'd been in decades. Because for the first time in my entire marriage, I knew something my husbands, didn't. I had power. If you've ever been underestimated your whole life and suddenly found yourself holding all the cards, you know how intoxicating that feeling is. Leave a comment if you've ever gotten revenge on someone who thought you were too weak or too stupid to fight back. Because what I did next, it required patience, planning, and a coldness I didn't know I had. I called our lawyer that afternoon. Not our family lawyer. Bob would find out about that too easily. I called Sarah's lawyer friend, Jennifer, and made an appointment under my maiden name. When I showed up the next day, I brought copies of everything: the hotel records Sarah had printed for me, the security footage on a thumb drive, screenshots of Bob's credit card statements I'd pulled from our online banking. Suddenly all those work dinners and business expenses in Portland made perfect sense, and a detailed timeline of every trip, every absence, every time he'd been sick or traveling, over the last 4 years. Jennifer, a sharp woman in her early 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and let out a low whistle. "Mrs. Henley," she said, "this is possibly the most elaborate case of fraud and infidelity I've ever encountered. You have grounds for divorce, obviously. But you might also have grounds for fraud, emotional distress, maybe even identity theft, depending on how they've been handling financial matters." "I don't want to divorce him yet," I said. She blinked. "I'm sorry." "I want to destroy him," I said calmly. "Both of them. I want them to lose everything. I want everyone they know to understand what they did. I want them humiliated, bankrupted, and broken. And then, when they have nothing left, when their reputations are ash and their futures are rubble, then I want a divorce." Jennifer stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Mrs. Henley, I think we're going to get along just fine." Over the next 2 weeks, we built my case with the precision of surgeons. Jennifer had investigators dig into David's life in Seattle, into his finances, into every digital footprint both brothers had left. And what we found was staggering. After Linda died, David had sold their house in Seattle. But he hadn't moved away. He'd bought a small apartment in Portland, 30 minutes from Ridgewood. The apartment was registered under an LLC that Bob had helped him set up. My husband had helped his brother establish a legal presence in Oregon specifically for this deception. The investigators found bank accounts I didn't know existed. Credit cards in Bob's name that I'd never seen statements for. A whole financial infrastructure built to support 2 separate lives. But here was the beautiful part, the part that made me smile. Bob had been stealing from our joint accounts to fund it. Small amounts at first, escalating over time. Money that should have been for our retirement, our grandchildren's college funds, the trip to Italy I'd always dreamed of taking. He'd been siphoning it off to pay for hotel rooms and maintain David's apartment and wine and dine a woman whose name I'd learned was Helen. Helen Pritchard. 61 years old. Divorced. 2 adult children. She'd met Bob, or who she thought was Bob, at a grief support group 4 years ago. She thought he was a widower named Robert Dawson, recently lost his wife, looking to rebuild his life. Bob had created an entire fake identity to seduce a woman at a grief support group. I couldn't even comprehend that level of deception. The more we dug, the worse it got. David had been using Bob's insurance information for his medical appointments. Bob had listed David as an authorized user on several of our credit cards. They'd been filing separate tax returns. Bob claimed to be single, living in Portland, while David claimed to be me. They'd literally divided Bob's life in half, split his marriage down the middle, and neither of them had lost a wink of sleep over it. "We have enough," Jennifer told me in our 3rd meeting. "We can take this to the police, to the IRS, to the Oregon State Bar. Bob's a licensed insurance broker. This could cost him his career. We can bury them." "Not yet," I said. "I want one more thing." "What's that?" "I want to confront them. Both of them. Together. I want to see their faces when they realize I know." Jennifer looked worried. "Mrs. Henley, Patty, that could be dangerous. We don't know how they'll react." "They're cowards," I said flatly. "Cowards and liars. They won't hurt me. They'll just crumble." She made me promise to have people there as witnesses. To do it in a public place. To have my phone recording the entire time. I agreed to all of it. Because the final piece of my revenge wasn't just about destroying them legally. It was about destroying them emotionally. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the betrayal I'd felt. I wanted them to understand that they'd underestimated me for the last time. I spent those 2 weeks playing the perfect wife to David, bringing him meals, asking about his day, holding his hand during evening TV watching. And every single moment was an act, a performance, a mask I wore while underneath I was sharpening knives. And you know what? Check the description below for more stories like this, because the confrontation, when it came, was even more devastating than I'd imagined. I chose a Sunday afternoon at the Clearwater Hotel. Sarah had booked their largest conference room and told Bob, the real Bob, the one living in room 412, that the hotel was hosting a surprise party for one of the long-term guests and they'd appreciate it if he and Helen could attend for a few minutes, for appearance's sake. She told David, the one in my bed, that Bob had a medical emergency and needed him to come to Portland immediately. Both of them believed her. Both of them showed up. The conference room had big windows overlooking the city. I'd positioned myself at the head of a long table, flanked by Jennifer on one side and Sarah on the other. My other 2 daughters, Melissa and Jennifer, stood near the door. I'd finally told them everything 2 days before, and their rage had been almost as fierce as mine. Almost. Bob walked in first, Helen on his arm. He was laughing at something she'd said, relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen him in years. He looked younger somehow. Lighter. Free. The smile died when he saw me. Patty. His face went white. What are you doing here? Hello, Robert, I said calmly. Why don't you and Helen have a seat? Helen looked confused, glancing between us. I don't understand. Robert, who is this? That's his wife, Sarah said coldly. My mother. Patty Henley. Married to Robert Henley for 41 years. The color drained from Helen's face too. She turned to Bob, her voice shaking. You told me your wife died. You told me. Let's wait for my brother, I interrupted. He should be here any moment. And right on cue, David walked through the door. He stopped dead when he saw Bob. Then saw me. Then saw the lawyers and my daughters and the recording equipment set up discreetly in the corner. If you've ever seen someone's whole world collapse in real time, you know what I saw in that moment. Both brothers standing there, mirror images of each other, their identical faces wearing identical expressions of pure terror. Have a seat, David, I said. We have a lot to discuss. What followed was 3 hours of the most brutal emotional warfare I've ever participated in. At first, they tried to lie. Then they tried to deny. Then they blamed each other. Finally, when Jennifer started laying out the legal documentation, the fraud, the tax evasion, the identity theft, the theft of marital assets, they just broke. David wept first. Huge, gasping sobs. Saying he'd been so lonely after Linda died. That Bob had suggested the arrangement. That it had started as just a few nights here and there so Bob could have some freedom, some escape from a marriage that had grown stale. That word, stale, hit me like a physical blow. Bob was quieter but no less devastated. He admitted it had been his idea. Said he'd felt trapped. That he loved me but wasn't in love with me anymore. That he'd thought he could have both lives, make everyone happy. That Helen had given him a fresh start, a chance to be someone new. You created a fake identity to seduce a widow at a grief support group, I said, my voice like ice. You stole money from your children's grandmother fund. You committed tax fraud. You let your brother sleep in my bed in my house, while you played house with a woman you lied to from day one. I turned to Helen, who'd been sitting in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. You were a victim in this too. He lied to both of us. I loved him, she whispered. I thought we were building a life together. So did I said. 41 years ago. Bob tried one last time. Patty, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Helen. David will go back to Seattle. We can fix this. I laughed. Actually laughed. It startled everyone in the room. Fix this. I repeated. Bob, there's nothing to fix. Our marriage ended years ago, I just didn't know it. But here's what's going to happen now. I nodded to Jennifer, who slid documents across the table. You're going to sign a settlement agreement giving me everything. The house, the cars, the retirement accounts, all of it. You're also going to repay every cent you stole from our joint accounts, with interest. David, you're going to sell your apartment and contribute half of those proceeds to the repayment fund. We can't afford, Bob started. You should have thought of that before you committed fraud, Jennifer cut in smoothly. Mrs. Henley is being generous. If she wanted to, she could have you both prosecuted. The IRS alone would love to see these tax returns. And the Oregon Insurance Commission would be very interested to learn about Mr. Henley's activities. You'll both also sign statements, I continued, detailing exactly what you did. These statements will be sent to your employers, your friends, your insurance agency clients, Bob. David, they'll go to Linda's family. I'm sure they'd love to know how you honored her memory. Everyone you know will understand exactly what kind of men you are. Patty, that will destroy us, David whispered. Yes, I said simply. It will. The room was silent except for Helen's quiet crying. You have 24 hours, Jennifer said. Sign the agreements, or Mrs. Henley takes this to the police, the IRS, and every media outlet in Portland. Your choice. They signed the next day. Both of them. Bob lost his insurance broker license in the investigation that followed. One of his colleagues reported him to the state board after receiving the statement I'd sent out. David had to file for bankruptcy. Helen cut all contact with Bob and, in a strange twist, sent me a letter apologizing and thanking me for exposing the truth before she'd wasted more years on a lie. The divorce was final 4 months later. I got everything I asked for. The house. The accounts. Even Bob's pension. My daughters have been incredible through all of this. Sarah still manages the Clearwater. She says she'll never forget the look on Bob's face when he realized he'd been caught at her hotel. Melissa and Jennifer take turns staying with me on weekends, making sure I'm okay, helping me adjust to being single again at 63. And you know what? I am okay. Better than okay. I took some of the settlement money and booked that trip to Italy I'd always wanted. I'm leaving next month. Alone. And I'm excited about it in a way I haven't been excited about anything in years. People ask me if I regret how I handled it. If I wish I'd just quietly divorced him, taken my half, and moved on. The answer is no. Not for a single second. Because here's what I learned, being underestimated is only a weakness if you accept it. The people who think you're too old, too trusting, too nice to fight back, those people are giving you the greatest weapon of all. The element of surprise. Bob and David thought I was just sweet, simple Patty. The wife who'd never question anything. The woman who'd grown invisible with age. They banked everything on me being too weak or too stupid or too beaten down to fight back. They were wrong. So if you're watching this and you're in a situation where someone's taking advantage of you, where someone's counting on you staying quiet and small and manageable, don't. Be ruthless. Be calculating. Be exactly as cold as they've been to you. And make them regret ever underestimating you. Check the description below for more stories like this. Stories about women who refused to stay silent. Who fought back. Who won. Because we deserve better. And it's never too late to demand it. My name is Patricia Henley. I'm 63 years old. I was married for 41 years to a man who thought I was too old and too trusting to notice when he replaced himself with his twin brother. He thought wrong. And that, as they say, made all the difference.